talking about the eating disorders, how does someone know if they may have an eating disorder or,
Hmm.
some form of challenge?
Cool. So, within the context of the fitness industry, we'll have heard the terms eating disorder and disordered eating thrown around. So, when we think about eating disorders, we've got actual mental health related diagnosis for this. So, things like anorexia, things like bulimia, things like binge eating. Then when it comes to the disorder, and again, let's just think about how those things are manifested physically. So again, I've just given you an example of what that cycle of binge eating
Yeah.
looks like. In terms of bulimia, again, we have a number of variables in there, but this will be individuals who are eating and then going and making themselves sick, or they're using things like laxatives and enemas, just again, incredibly harmful on the body. Anorexia will tend to present itself through complete starvation. Then we go to the disordered eating side of things. And we've got a relatively new diagnosis that's come through over the last, say, 10 years, and it's called orthorexia. Orthorexia is the absolute obsession around clean eating. And it's really interesting to see that in the context of your social media platforms with the bonkers information that we see. The individuals who come through, and these are big personalities, and they're saying, yeah,
Yeah.
do this dry water fast and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like,
So
you
much
are
rubbish out
gonna
there.
screw some people up more than you can comprehend.
Yeah.
So now going back to the, getting specific on the question that you've asked, what are some things to look out for our listeners? Well, I gave you some examples of some stuff that was coming up for me. One is rigidity. Okay, so sure, in order to get results, like I still love training, bro, and I still love being big and strong, and I still have a strong looking physique,
Yeah.
but that is such a byproduct of ease and flexibility. As in, if someone calls me up because we're going out for dinner, oh yeah, 100% I'm on board. Now, if that level of rigidity is in place where someone says, hey, we're going out for dinner, or suddenly what you thought was going to be your meal plan for the day has now changed, if that causes loads of discomfort inside you, if you are an individual who has to track everything you eat and you can't not do that, and every time you go out for a restaurant, you look at the calories to pick the lowest thing, and if you've eaten, you then feel bad and need to go out and exercise the next day, these are all signs of disordered
Yeah.
eating habits. And the challenge, brother, is this: many of those behaviors are normalized within the health and fitness industry. They're normalized, and that's the problem. They're not normal. Okay. A healthy, balanced relationship with food, as far as I'm concerned, is one that is all inclusive. There are no good foods and there are no bad foods. Yes, and because people will be thinking like, oh, that's bullshit. It's like, no, no, no. There are no good foods, there are no bad foods. In terms of the bad foods, yeah, if you're celiac, then don't eat gluten because that's going to be bad for you. Yeah, if you are lactose intolerant, don't eat dairy. It's going to be terrible for you. But in terms of, having a Mars bar, man, if you want a Mars bar a couple of times a week, nothing bad's going to happen to you, right? This is the premise. What we're looking for with health is if the majority of the time I'm fueling my body adequately with nutrient dense single ingredient foods, then of course there is a time and a place to bring what people would deem as more flexible foods in. The problem would be if someone's like, no, I can't have a Mars bar because that's super, super bad. And if I have it, it's going to ruin my diet and terrible things are going to happen. That's when you're like, cool. That those are little subtle alarm bells.
Yeah. So how does someone start the healing process and ultimately improve their relationship with food?
Understand this, that whilst the presenting symptoms, the obsession around food, body image, etc., whilst those are there, I want you to think about them up here. These are the presenting symptoms, but they are not the problem. The problem isn't to do with food. The problem isn't to do with your body. The problem isn't to do with exercise. The problem is that those are your coping mechanism for something far deeper rooted. Okay. I have various things that came up for me along my journey that stemmed way back from childhood, growing up in a very strict Christian household, struggling with an inability to be authentic, right? to like figure out what life was like for me, because I was brought up like, this is how we do things. Thinking about the context of my relationships and how I didn't allow myself to really feel what was going on. And after both of those breakups, man, I didn't grieve those relationships. I just pushed down.
Yeah.
And so here's what we have to understand. This is a Carl Jung quote, right? He says, what you resist will persist. So I kept pushing down and pushing down and pushing down and pushing down and feeling terrible and terrible and terrible and terrible. And because that's how I'm feeling, and I don't want to feel those things, it's so much easier to misinterpret those feelings of discomfort and to put them into a convenient story that says, when I look like this, then all of my problems will go away. That's where a lot of people are at. And so when it comes to the healing journey, it's about ditching those stories. Sure, in a therapeutic setting, talking about stuff is important, yes. But, you know, when we look at the studies from people like Peter Levine, these are like amazing trauma specialists, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, what our understanding now is how trauma impacts the body, okay? And every time you are resisting feeling into stuff, all that's going to happen is you become more and more disconnected from yourself. And the evidence that we have suggests, it tells us that the research that we have, neuroscience research, the only way that we can start to change the way we feel is by becoming super, super aware of what it is that's actually going on inside, in the body, this internal inner experience. And not being okay with it, because this is a thing that I see floating around at the moment. You know, lots of people use the terms like being grounded. You know, let's get grounded. Well, it's not about getting rid of those things. It's not about getting rid of the feelings of stress and anxiety. Those will happen in time. The practice is about being able to accept and acknowledge that that is how you're feeling in that moment and that it's okay. So you're really showing up for yourself in that moment, staying in your body, staying with that feeling of discomfort, irrespective of how uncomfortable it is. And there are obviously practices to improve your tolerance. But yeah, it comes back to that let's use the expression, feeling is healing. Okay. I didn't allow myself to feel. I never allowed myself to feel anything. That's when my problems came. And so the work that I do now is bringing people out of their heads and back into their bodies.
Yeah. My name is Samuel Main, and I truly hope that you've got value from today's video. If you have, please do hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow.